My name's Brandon. I'm 34, and I wasn't even supposed to go over there that day. My dad and his wife, my stepmom, Sharon, had invited me for lunch a few times, but I kept making excuses. Not because we had some big fight or anything, but because every time I sat at that table, I felt like I didn't fully belong. I was raised by my mom for most of my life, and my dad sort of floated in and out after the divorce. We were never close, but we had a working relationship. He showed up to my high school graduation, sent the occasional birthday text, that kind of thing. I moved out at 19, worked 2 jobs through college, and never really asked him for anything. Except once when I was 25 and got hit with a medical bill I couldn't handle. I asked him for help. He said he couldn't. That lunch wasn't supposed to be anything special. It's just burgers, potato salad, and a chance for him to catch up, as he put it. I got there around noon and brought a bottle of wine, even though I knew they probably wouldn't touch it. My half-brother Tyler was there too. He's 27, Sharon's kid, and we've never been close. Not out of any specific issue, we just lived separate lives. Tyler's one of those guys who always seems to land on his feet, even when nothing he does makes sense. I grabbed a plate, sat down at the patio table, and for the first half hour, everything was weirdly normal, till Sharon opened her mouth and said something that made my blood run cold. I'm just glad we were able to help. Tyler, get the bakery going before the market shifts again. I froze for a second, like my brain. Had to buffer what I just heard. Bakery? What bakery? I looked over at Tyler, who suddenly seemed very interested in his coleslaw. My dad didn't say anything. He just took a sip of his beer and stared at the yard like he hadn't heard it. I asked, "You opened a bakery?" trying to keep my voice casual. Tyler gave a half shrug and said, "Yeah, kind of a small thing. Just testing the waters with a storefront in town." I said, "When did this happen?" He mumbled something about a couple of months ago, and Sharon cut in with, "We just wanted to support his dream a little. You know how tough it is to get started." I nodded slowly, putting the pieces together. My dad had supported his dream, the same dad who told me to my face that he couldn't help when I had $3,000 in hospital debt and no backup plan. I put my fork down and just stared at my plate for a bit. I wasn't even sure if I was more hurt or angry. Sharon clearly didn't realize what she'd just dropped in my lap, or maybe she did and didn't think it was a big deal. My dad still hadn't looked at me, just kept chewing like we were. All still talking about the weather. Asked, "How much did you put into it?" Trying to sound neutral, even though my voice cracked a little. Sharon said, "Oh, not much. Around 25, 30 grand, just to get the lease and equipment going." I felt something shift in my chest. I asked, "Wait, you gave him 30 grand? This time, my dad finally looked at me, not apologetically, like this. It was a totally normal conversation, he said. It was a good opportunity. He needed a leg up. And that was the moment something snapped inside me. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking a little. I picked up my napkin just to give them something to do. "So, when I came to you for help a few years ago and you said you didn't have it, what changed?" I asked it flat, without raising my voice, but the air shifted instantly. Sharon looked confused for a second, then glanced at my dad like maybe she missed something, set his beer down and said, "Brandon, that was a different time. Said it was 2016. I had a medical emergency. You said you couldn't help me because things were tight." He sighed and leaned back in his chair like I was exhausting him, and they were tight. Things got better since then. Tyler still hadn't said a word. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the lawn. I kept going because at that point it felt like the only thing I could do. "So you got better financially, and when that happened, the first thing you did was give him 30 grand for a bakery?" He didn't answer right away. Jess said Tyler had a plan. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just that. Like I hadn't spent 2 weeks eating ramen and skipping follow-ups at urgent care because I didn't want more bills. I looked at Sharon, who was clearly starting to regret bringing any of it up. "Did you know he turned me down when I asked for help?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't know that," she said finally. I believed her, but I didn't believe she cared. At that point, the energy at the table completely shifted. Nobody was touching their food. Even the birds in the yard felt too loud. No. I looked around and realized I was the only one who felt surprised. Tyler looked uncomfortable, but not shocked. My dad looked annoyed, like I was making something small into a scene. Sharon kept glancing between us like she wanted to rewind the last 10 minutes. I stood up and said, "I'm not trying to start anything. I just want to understand how you made that choice." My dad shrugged and said, "I already told you. He had a plan. You were struggling. It's different." It's when it really landed. In his mind, Tyler was an investment. I was just a liability. I looked right at him and said, "You didn't even ask what I needed it for. You just said no." He didn't flinch, just said, "I remember." Like that made it okay. Sharon got up then and started clearing plates. Like we had finished eating, I said, "Don't worry, I'm not staying for dessert." She stopped moving, but didn't say anything. Tyler finally spoke and said, "I didn't know you asked him for money." His voice was quiet, and for the first time, he looked kind of guilty. I nodded. "Yeah, you were probably too busy designing your logo." I didn't mean to say that part out loud, but it slipped. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even crying. But something in me had checked out completely. I didn't storm out or slam the door or anything. Just walked through the house, grabbed my keys off the little bowl by the front door, and left. No one followed me. I got in my car and sat there for a second, engine running, trying to calm the shaking in my chest. Not rage, not even sadness at that point. Just this hollow, empty thud. Like the last bit of something I'd been holding on to had snapped. I wasn't shocked he helped Tyler. I was shocked how easily he justified not helping me. How quickly. I was labeled the one who didn't deserve a leg up. It was never said out loud. But in that moment, I realized I was the backup son, the one who figured things out so well on his own. No one ever thought to ask if I was drowning. I drove around, aimlessly for about 40 minutes. Ended up in a gas station parking lot sitting in the car with the AC on full blast. My phone buzzed once, a text from Sharon that said, "Sorry if that came out weird. Wasn't meant to hurt you." I didn't reply. What could I even say? To that, the truth is, I wasn't hurt by Sharon. She was just a passenger in all of it. The person who hurt me was the man who raised me to believe that if I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, didn't ask for too much, he'd always respect me. But respect doesn't mean much when it doesn't come with basic human decency. When I needed help, I asked. He had it. And he said no. That's not something you just forget. When I finally got home, I didn't unpack the leftovers Sharon had sent me with. I just dropped the bag on the counter and sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on. I replayed everything, her comment about the bakery, the number 30,000, the way my dad wouldn't even flinch. I realized then that this wasn't about one lunch. It wasn't even about the money, really. It was about the pattern. The way I'd always been expected to figure it out alone, while Tyler was quietly supported. Every family has a dynamic, but I'd never fully seen ours for what it was, until now. I wasn't the one they counted on. I was the one they counted out. That hit harder than I thought it would. I've been on my own for most of my adult life. I've paid rent late, juggled bills, worked weekends while in school, and never once asked for more than I absolutely needed. And when I did ask once, it wasn't even for that much. It was $3,000. Wasn't buying a car or starting a business. I just wanted to stay afloat. And he looked me in the eye and said, "I wish I could help, but I just can't. No follow-up, no check-in later, just silence." Meanwhile, Tyler gets an entire startup funded because he had a plan. I think that was the moment I stopped seeing my dad as someone who misunderstood me. He didn't misunderstand anything, just didn't value me the same way. The next morning I woke up to a message from Tyler. Just said, "Hey man, I didn't mean for any of that to happen like that. Hope you're good." I stared at it for a while. I wasn't sure if he felt guilty or just uncomfortable now that it was out in the open. Either way, I didn't reply. I wasn't mad at Tyler for taking the money. Might have done the same in his shoes. But I was mad at how easy it was for him to live in a story where I didn't exist. He had to know what that money meant. He had to know the way our dad spoke about me, or didn't speak about me. It's not like any of this was new. It's the difference. Now was. I couldn't pretend anymore. Not to them. Not to myself. I didn't block anyone, didn't post a dramatic message. Just Plugged. No calls, no visits, no Sunday lunches. My dad didn't reach out either. That was probably the clearest answer of all. If I'd blown up at the table, maybe he would have. Felt compelled to do damage control. But I stayed calm. I left quiet. And that gave him an out. He took it, and I took mine. I think I finally accepted that sometimes the people who raised you aren't your people. They're just the ones who happen to be there. And that realization is both freeing and brutal. You walk around for years thinking maybe one day you'll be seen. Then one backyard conversation tells you everything you needed to know. That week I didn't hear from anyone. Not Sharon, not Tyler, definitely not my dad. I kept waiting, thinking maybe someone would call and try to smooth it over. Nothing. Just regular life going on like none of it had happened. I went to work, grabbed groceries, watered my plants, but everything felt slightly different. Like I was carrying something invisible that made the air around me feel heavier. I kept thinking back to how casual it was, how $30,000 was brought up like it was just a small favor, like I wouldn't connect the dots. That's what stung the most, not just the choice, but the assumption that I'd stay quiet after finding out. Eventually I told one friend, not the whole story, just the main parts. He didn't say much, just kind of nodded and said, "Yeah, families are weird like that." I wanted more of a reaction, but at the same time, I didn't, because deep down, I knew that if someone really understood how bad it felt, I'd probably fall apart. So I kept it surface level, pretended I was over it. But it stuck with me. Every time I got a text notification, I half expected it to be from my dad. Not to apologize, but maybe to act like nothing happened. That's his thing, let the dust settle, then slide back in like everything's fine. But this time, I didn't want fine. I wanted distance. 2 weeks went by, then 3. Nothing. And somewhere around week 4, I stopped checking my phone out of habit. I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping for some magic reset where he'd call and explain everything in a way that made it make sense. Because nothing he could say would undo what I felt in that moment sitting at his table, realizing that when he had the chance to support me, he didn't even think twice before saying no. But when Tyler needed something, he opened the wallet. Like it was the obvious thing to do. It wasn't about fairness. It was about priority. I finally saw where I stood. I started deleting things slowly. Photos, texts, old emails. Not in some dramatic purge, but piece by piece. Clearing space? It wasn't bitterness. It felt more like closure, the kind you give yourself when no one else is going to offer it. I even boxed up a few things from childhood that I still had: a watch he gave me when I turned 18, a couple of old birthday cards, and put them in storage. I didn't want to burn anything or erase the past. I just didn't want it in my space anymore. I'd spent years clinging to this quiet hope that one day he'd see me, and now that hope was gone. What was left was quieter, cleaner, sad in some ways, but honest. One morning I was getting coffee near my place and ran into one of Sharon's friends. She smiled and asked how I was doing, then casually said, "I heard Tyler's bakery is doing really well. Your dad's so proud." I smiled, nodded, said something like "that's great," and left. I stood outside the cafe for a minute, holding my cup, trying to shake the weird weight in my chest. It wasn't jealousy. I wasn't mad Tyler was doing well. I was mad that my dad could so easily brag about him while pretending I didn't even exist. The people who barely knew me had a version of my dad that I'd never met. The one who shows up. The one who invests. The one who talks about his kid like he matters. I realized in that moment that I'd probably never get that version of him. And maybe Tyler didn't either. Not fully, but he got enough of it to feel like he mattered. I don't need a parent who's perfect. I just wanted one who tried. And when I needed help just once, he had the means and chose not to. That kind of thing rewrites your understanding of a person. It takes someone you've spent your life making excuses for and finally forces you to see them clearly. I used to think maybe I was the problem, that I didn't ask right, or that I didn't deserve help. But now, I know better. I did ask. I asked plainly. And he said no. That was his choice. Walking away was mine. I started doing little things for myself after that. Things I used to put off: repainting my apartment, signing up for a weekend. Class, finally taking a trip I'd been putting off for years. None of it was dramatic or flashy. It's just reminders that I wasn't stuck, that I didn't need to keep orbiting people who wouldn't choose me back. It's a weird kind of freedom. Realizing you don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your last name. I didn't make some big announcement. I just started living like my life was mine again, and it felt good. Not in a triumphant way, but in a steady, grounded way. Like I'd stopped carrying weight that was never mine to begin with. Around that time, I got a short email from Sharon. She said she hoped I was okay and that family stuff gets complicated sometimes. That was it. No mention of the money. No acknowledgement of the conversation. I didn't reply. Wasn't anything left to say. I think part of me wanted her to name it, to say we were wrong, or at least we should have told you. But that kind of honesty would have required seeing me as someone who had been hurt, and I don't think they see me that way. I think to them, I'm the strong one, the one who doesn't need much. It's always how they framed it. But even strong people get tired of being invisible. It's strange how easy it is to drift from people when you stop being the one who keeps the connection alive. After a while, the silence doesn't feel heavy anymore. It just feels honest. No one called for my birthday this year. Not my dad, not Sharon, not even Tyler. And yeah, it stung a little. But it also confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a family that forgot. It was a family that chose silence when honesty got uncomfortable. That made peace with a lie, because it was easier than admitting what they'd done. I didn't cry about it. I ordered takeout, watched a movie, and let it pass. Quiet birthdays aren't new to me. The only difference now is that I don't pretend. It's temporary. I used to imagine some future version of me giving a speech at a wedding or a reunion, thanking my dad for everything he taught me. That image is gone now. Not out of spite, but because it doesn't belong anymore. He did teach me things, just not the ones I thought he would. He taught me what not to tolerate. He taught me the value of keeping receipts emotionally, not financially. Taught me how it feels when someone has the ability to help and chooses not to. And that's a lesson I won't pass down. If I ever have kids, I'll be the one who shows up. No conditions, no favorites. Just presence. Die. Because I know what it's like to sit across from someone who has the means to lift you up and decides not to move a finger. I still live in the same city. I pass by Tyler's bakery sometimes without meaning to. It's a nice place. Clean signage, good lighting, always a couple of people inside. I've never gone in. Not because I hate him, but because I don't want to pretend. I don't want to smile and act like we're brothers, just because the world expects us to be. We're not enemies, just strangers who used to share a table. I think that's what people forget. Not all breakups are loud. Some just dissolve in silence. One minute you're passing the ketchup, the next you're realizing the people around you never actually saw you. There's still a piece of me that wonders. If my dad thinks about it, if he ever replays that day in his head, if he ever regrets not saying more or saying yes when he had the chance, we'll never know. And honestly, I'm okay not knowing. Closure isn't always about hearing someone admit they were wrong. Sometimes it's just about deciding you've had enough. You've seen what you needed to see. And once you do, there's no going back. It's not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. That's where I'm at now, not angry, not waiting. It's just done. Last time I heard my dad's voice was in that backyard saying he had a plan. I think about that sentence more than I should, not because I want to argue with it, but because it told me everything. In his eyes, Tyler was worth betting on. I was a risk. The irony is, I've never failed him, never gotten into trouble, never asked for bailouts, never embarrassed him. And maybe that's exactly why I was easy to overlook. I made life simpler by not needing him. But when I finally did, when it really mattered, he was already invested somewhere else. That's not something I'll ever forget. And no amount of how are you's or awkward lunches will change it. Sometimes I get asked if I still talk. To my dad, it usually comes up at work or with acquaintances who assume things are fine. I just say, not really, and leave it at that. People don't push. They assume distance means drama, and they're not wrong. But it's not the explosive kind. It's the quiet kind. The kind that grows slowly over years of being overlooked, until one day something small opens the floodgates. A sentence. Number, a look, and then it all makes sense. You see the full picture? Once you do, you stop trying to repaint it. There's a photo of me and my dad from when I was a kid, tucked inside a box I haven't opened in a while. We're at a baseball game. I'm maybe 8 or 9. He's got his arm around me, both of us smiling like we didn't know the future. Yet, I haven't thrown it out. I don't think I ever will. It's not about clinging to hope or holding on to the past. It's just part of the record, a moment that happened, a version of us that existed even if it didn't last. People always talk about moving on, but sometimes moving on just means living with the truth and letting it settle somewhere you don't have to look at every day. I don't think I'll ever confront him again. There won't be some big sit-down. No dramatic final phone call. If he ever reaches out, I'm not sure I'd even respond. Not because I hate him, but because the silence that followed that day said everything I needed to hear. No apologies, no follow-ups, just absence. And maybe that's how this story ends, not with screaming, not with forgiveness, just with the quiet realization that sometimes people leave your life long before they're actually gone. And when you finally notice, all you can do is walk away.